disturbing motives who may have gotten away with murder. On an icy, stormy evening, an intruder slips through the window of Charlie Jr.'s second-floor nursery. And just like that, the boy is gone. When Charles and Ann Lindbergh discover their son is missing, they're terrified. They call the New Jersey State Police. When detectives arrive, they find an envelope with a ransom note inside. The kidnapper wants $50,000 for the safe return of Charlie Jr. They also find muddy footprints, but there's no blood and no fingerprints. Investigators also discover a ladder with a broken rung, suggesting the kidnapper snapped it while climbing up or down. When the press catches wind of the kidnapping, it sets off an international firestorm.
Not a single bed is overlooked in the search for the most famous baby in the world.
Because Charles Lindbergh is a living legend. In 1927, Lindbergh becomes the first aviator to fly non-stop from New York to Paris across the Atlantic Ocean. After he lands, he becomes the most famous man on the planet. And with so much fame comes incredible fortune. Lindy becomes one of the wealthiest celebrities in the world, making the Lindbergh family a target. Stealing Charles Lindbergh's son is an audacious crime, and police have little to go on. They launch a nationwide manhunt to locate the kidnapper and return Charlie Jr. home safely. Desperate to get his son back, wealthy Lindbergh agrees to pay the $50,000 ransom for Jr.'s release. But to catch the kidnapper, the FBI marks the serial numbers on the money used for the ransom payment. The trap is set. If so much as a single bill is deposited in a bank, investigators will be able to trace it back to Charlie's kidnapper. The kidnapper receives the ransom and reveals that the boy is at Woodlawn Cemetery at Whitmore and Fremont. But when investigators arrive, there is no sign of the boy. Charles and Ann are devastated. It's a shocking setback. But detectives begin to wonder, is there more to this case than meets the eye? Months later, the kidnapping case takes a horrifying turn. Just 4 miles from the flyer's estate, Charlie Jr. is found dead in the forest. And when detectives look closely at the boy's body, there is little trace of blood, and Charlie has a hole in his skull. Even more alarming, several vital organs are missing. Investigators want to know, how did Charlie Jr. suffer such ghastly injuries? What they uncover will outrage the nation, but a fresh analysis of the autopsy report almost a century later has inspired a controversial new theory that suggests an even more twisted and macabre motive for the young boy's death. If accurate, the identity of the suspected killer is almost unthinkable. Months after the disappearance of Charles Lindbergh's young son, he turns up dead just miles from the family estate, and the condition of the boy's body is disturbing. There's a hole in his skull, which is also crushed. There is little sign of blood, and in a bizarre twist, some of his organs appear to be missing. Looking at all the evidence, detectives believe the kidnapper dropped Charlie while descending from the nursery when their wooden ladder broke, creating the hole in Junior's skull. Police suspect that within minutes, the child dies from the massive impact, and the abductor abandons Charlie's body in the forest. They suspect the toddler's internal injuries are caused by wild animals. When the press gets a hold of the story, outrage spreads from coast to coast. the son of America's greatest living hero, dies in a grisly, brutal murder. And police still can't find Charlie's killer. It isn't until 2 years later that some of the FBI's marked bills from the ransom are spent at a gas station in New York City. Agents trace the money back to the man who buys the fuel. German carpenter Bruno Richard Hauptmann.
You are under arrest.
Looking into Hauptmann's background, detectives are they see no connection between Bruno and the Lindbergh family. However, when they search Hauptmann's old junkyard shack, they find over $14,000 in ransom bills. Bruno is arrested for the kidnapping and murder of Charles Lindbergh Jr. But Hauptmann asserts he's innocent. Around the world, newspapers hail Hauptmann's case the trial of the century.
He wanted that money so he could, and he did, live a life of luxury and ease so he wouldn't have to work. He quit his job the day he collected the $50,000. The very day.
During his trial, Bruno's attorney claims the case against Hauptmann is weak. Bruno testifies the money found in his garage belongs to a deceased business partner. Bruno's wife, Anna, testifies that Hauptmann was with her the night of the kidnapping. And Bruno's attorney reminds the court that none of Hauptmann's fingerprints are ever found on the ladder, the ransom note, or inside the Lindbergh nursery. But to the jury, the marked ransom bills are compelling evidence. Bruno Richard Hauptmann is found guilty of murder. And on April 3rd, 1936, he dies in the electric chair. America is relieved. Justice has finally been served for the terrible murder of Charles Lindbergh's poor baby son. But many begin to wonder, did authorities execute the wrong man? In the years following Charlie's death, biographers discover Lindbergh was obsessed with his son's physical appearance. Authors contend when Charlie is born in 1930, his aviator father is unhappy with Junior's large head and deformed toes on his right foot, symptoms of the condition known as rickets. Some allege that Lindbergh, America's rugged, handsome hero, fears his own son looks like a weakling. Charles Lindbergh is also a believer in eugenics, a now discredited science based on the theory that one could use selective breeding to rid the world of genetically inferior humans. And Lindbergh was known to have a close relationship with the nefarious godfather of eugenics, Alexis Carrel. This leads a group of academics to come up with a new theory for Charlie's disappearance. In 2020, forensic pathologist Dr. Peter Speth conducts new analysis on the forensic evidence from the murder, and what he finds is disturbing.
When I looked at the autopsy report, there was something that caught my attention. The body, when it was found, was in a state of advanced decay, and the organs were gone. But what struck me was the face. The forehead was so well preserved. And the skin on the right foot was white. And yet the legs were skeletonized. How did that happen? How was it possible to preserve the face and the right foot? It suggests chemicals. So I began to research, what do taxidermists use to preserve the hide? They use what is called tannic acid, or tannin. Now I became interested in who had knowledge of tannic acid, and I hit pay dirt. Alexis Carrel.
As we know, Alexis Carrel is the godfather of the sinister theory of eugenics, who Lindbergh counted as a close friend. Dr. Speth speculates that this evidence points to a harrowing possibility.
I believe that Charles Lindbergh and Alexis Carrel carried out surgical procedures to solve some of these many problems that Chas Jr. had because he's abnormal, and then failed. So they personally in the killing of that child.
Many find this theory too shocking to believe. However, there's compelling evidence supporting Dr. Speth's claims.
Why then preserve the face and the right foot? Well, if the body's in advanced decay, how are you going to identify the baby? And what are the two identifying features? One, the prominent forehead, and secondly, the overlapping toes on the right foot.
Dr. Speth further speculates that Lindbergh was certain that he wanted the body of Charles Jr. recovered, so that no one would come out later in life claiming they were the lost boy. There's no doubt this is a highly controversial allegation, but there's one more detail that may fuel this theory even more.
Charles Lindbergh was leading the investigation and telling the state police what they could or could not do. He had the baby cremated and put out an order that none of the evidence would ever undergo further scientific investigations. To this day, the governors, the attorney general, and state police have been upholding that.
Charles Lindbergh was a larger-than-life icon who changed the world forever. But he was also a very complex figure, living a life of contradictions. Will we ever know what really happened that stormy night in 1932? Most Lindbergh authors, scholars, and historians dismiss this unsettling theory as too lurid to believe. My own take is that the evidence to support it is highly circumstantial. What cannot be doubted, though, is the true tragedy here, the senseless death of an innocent child. We now take you from the historic tragedy of the Lindbergh baby to an assault on American diplomats and secret agents in modern day. Welcome to paradise. But it's a paradise that's soon to be lost. It's 2016 on the island of Cuba, in a quiet, upscale neighborhood considered the Beverly Hills of Havana. It's a popular location for foreign diplomats and U.S. embassy workers. But soon, they'll be seemingly attacked by something terrifying, something beyond all comprehension. Doug Ferguson and Kate Husband are a married couple working at the U.S. Embassy in Havana. They're enjoying a relaxing evening after work. What they don't know is that their world is about to be turned upside down. As they prepare for dinner, a high-pitched sound suddenly fills their home. And it feels like something is drilling into their skulls and somehow piercing their brains. Is it all in their heads? Or are there far more sinister forces involved? Embassy workers Doug Ferguson and Kate Husband are suffering the worst headaches of their lives after a high-pitched noise penetrates their home in Havana, Cuba. But Kate seems to get the worst of it. She deals with a constant state of vertigo, nausea, as well as brain fog. What they're experiencing doesn't have a name yet. At work, Doug makes a shocking discovery. The same strange things are happening to his co-workers. Dozens of U.S. Embassy workers in Havana are experiencing the same strange collection of symptoms: dizziness, trouble sleeping, vomiting, and short and long-term memory loss. This is definitely not the office flu. The media catches wind, and the mystery illness is dubbed Havana Syndrome. But it's not just limited to Havana. Cases with similar symptoms start popping up, affecting U.S. employees all around the world. There are incidents in Poland, Taiwan, Australia, Colombia, Tbilisi, Georgia, and Moscow. All the victims are either State Department employees, CIA intelligence officers, or their families. Is this all just a strange coincidence, or are dark forces at work? December 2017. CIA officer Mark Polymeropoulos is in Moscow visiting intelligence contacts. Little does he know he's about to get taken out by an invisible attack.
I wake up in the middle of the night in early December 2017 in a hotel room in Moscow, and something really extraordinary is happening. My ears are ringing. I have tinnitus, which is very disorienting. It's a sound that never stops in your ear. I have an incredible case of vertigo. The room is spinning uncontrollably. I'm physically sick. I have a splitting headache, a migraine, and I'm realizing that something is going on much more than food poisoning. Something is happening to me, which was something that was very disconcerting because I've been shot at in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. I put my life at risk numerous times. And this is a feeling I've never experienced before because I had no control over what was happening. I was terrified.
It seems Mark is the latest victim of Havana syndrome. 1 year since cases began, people start asking the obvious question. If American diplomats and spies are the only people affected, could this be some sort of targeted attack? The U.S. State Department is eager to find answers and sets up a study at the University of Pennsylvania. In March of 2018, 21 victims from Havana, including Doug Ferguson and Kate Husband, are flown to Philadelphia and put through a battery of tests at University of Pennsylvania's Center for Brain Injury and Repair. The doctors are looking for any possible causes of Havana syndrome, a virus, neurotoxins, even mass hysteria or group psychosis. What they find is even more bizarre. Scans reveal brain damage in these patients consistent with what you'd expect to see after a series of repeated concussions. But none of these patients have sustained any kind of physical head injury. For some victims like Doug Ferguson, he'll make a full recovery 9 months after the attack. But his wife Kate is told that her brain looks as though it's aged 25 years almost overnight, and is forced into medical retirement. And then, researchers at the University of Pennsylvania come to a truly shocking conclusion. They believe they've determined the cause of all of this: microwave radiation. Researchers point to the screeching cricket sound that often accompanies Havana syndrome. It's consistent with something called the Frey effect, the sound microwave radiation makes when it penetrates your skull. And exposure to microwaves results in the excruciating symptoms that line up with those reported by syndrome victims. The Penn study doesn't pinpoint where the microwaves come from, but at the end of their report, they do mention that Russia has been developing capabilities around microwave weapons. Okay, feels like they might have buried the lead on that one, but come on. The idea that Russian spies are shooting beams of microwave energy at Americans, it sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie or a cheap spy novel. Except, it isn't, because they've already done it. American attorney Mark Zayed, who represents more than 24 victims of Havana syndrome, is leading the campaign to find answers to this mysterious illness.
I was provided an unclassified memorandum by NSA in October 2014, 2 years before Havana, that revealed the existence of intelligence information concerning a foreign adversary. Quote, with a high-powered microwave system weapon that may have the ability to weaken, intimidate, or kill an enemy over time and without leaving evidence.
Despite this testimony, the government continues to deny that Havana syndrome is a real medical condition.
In summer of 2020, my symptoms are getting much worse. And so I make a decision to go public with my story because I was so desperate for healthcare. The agency is refusing to send me to a doctor. Again, it's the notion all I want to do is see a doctor.
For over 8 years, Havana syndrome has affected American diplomats and officials, but its origin, and indeed its very cause, are still shrouded in controversy and mystery. Then, in March of 2024, a bombshell investigative report is published, perhaps revealing all. Long before Travis Walton, the idea of aliens captivated pop culture all the way back to the pulp magazines of the 20s and Orson Welles' famous radio broadcast of War of the Worlds in the 30s. But in 1959, Soviet astrophysicist Yosef Shklovsky dropped a cosmic bombshell that sent UFO fever into a global frenzy. He suggested that Phobos, one of Mars's moons, might actually be an artificial satellite. That's right, a Martian Death Star. Shklovsky believed the strange orbit and low density of the moon were clues that it was a secret spacecraft built by an advanced civilization of ancient extraterrestrials. And even though his bold theory was categorically debunked, it did nothing to diminish our collective obsession with the hope that we aren't completely alone in the universe. The truth is out there, right guys? Starting in Havana, Cuba in 2016, cases of a strange sickness affect over 200 Americans working for the government all around the world. Many victims believe it's a deliberate attack, but U.S. authorities remain stubbornly unconvinced. A new investigative report could change all that. October 2021 in Tbilisi, Georgia, a quiet Eastern European town along the Russian border. The wife of an American diplomat is home doing laundry. Suddenly, as acute ringing fills her ears, her head feels like it's in a vice grip, and a knife is stabbing her brain. Panicked, she sees a car outside she doesn't recognize. Standing next to it is a tall, well-dressed young man. She locks eyes with him before he turns and leaves. For 3 years, she suffers with the painful effects from that day. Severe daily migraines, hearing problems, and 2 major surgeries to repair holes in her ear canal that her doctors can't explain. She doesn't know what happened to her, but she's convinced the man she saw outside her home played a part. It's a face she can't forget, but never expects to see again. March 2024, investigative journalist Christo Grozev is working on his biggest story yet, trying to uncover the origins of Havana syndrome. As part of his investigation, he is interviewing the diplomat's wife.
I want to see if you can identify this man.
And shows her a picture of a young blonde man. She is instantly filled with fear and dread. It's the man she knows is responsible for her 3 years of torture and torment. The man in the picture, Albert Averyanov, a Russian military intelligence operative. He's part of a secret unit inside Russian military intelligence known only by its code number, 29155. In March of 2024, Grozev and his magazine, The Insider, released the shocking findings of their investigation. Grozev uncovers a secret Russian cable showing members of Unit 29155 receiving awards for work on the development of non-lethal acoustic weapons. After 10 years of confusion and suffering, this document and the entire investigation possibly confirm the cause and the culprits behind Havana syndrome.
This issue becomes very problematic because, in my view, and I think in the view of many others, this is an act of war. And so it then calls into question, what does the United States government do about this? Perhaps that's one of the reasons they don't want to get to the bottom of it, because then the question, as you sit around the National Security Council, where the White House is, what do we do?
Officially, the U.S. government still says they do not believe Havana syndrome is caused by any kind of weapon. The CIA, the House Intelligence Committee, and the National Intelligence Council all state that there's no conclusive evidence a foreign adversary is responsible for the phenomenon. But try telling that to Kate Husband, Mark Polymeropoulos, and the hundreds of others who are convinced they've suffered, and are still suffering, due to some kind of secret attack. So, is a Russian intelligence operation really to blame for Havana Syndrome? And are we standing on the precipice of a new and terrifying kind of warfare? Hopefully, the answers will soon be definitively on the record. But be warned, the truth could be extremely painful. I'm Josh Gates. Until next time, travel adventurously. A grisly serial killer slashes his way through the foggy streets of London. And after 150 years, we may finally know his identity. In one of the most remote parts of the world, a savage beast stalks its human prey. New DNA evidence might finally reveal, is this monster or myth? On a Chicago TV station in the late 1980s, criminal hackers terrorize the airwaves.
Giant bastard face.
We dig deep to unmask the anonymous monsters who have struck fear in our hearts. In the corridors of time are mysteries that defy explanation. Now, I'm traveling through history itself on a search for the truth. New evidence. Shocking answers. I'm Josh Gates, and these are my expedition files. My kids are young enough to still be scared of monsters hiding under the bed. And like generations of good parents before me, I reassure them. I tell them monsters aren't real, that there's nothing to be afraid of. But of course, that isn't quite true. Although they don't tend to hide under our beds, sometimes monsters are real. Tonight, we examine the files of 3 extraordinary cases of monsters whose terrifying acts remain shrouded in mystery to this very day. From a nightmarish serial killer whose name is synonymous with fear, to a frightening beast said to stalk the Himalayas, and an agent of chaos menacing the city of Chicago. One question threads the needle between these 3 remarkable stories. Who or what is behind the monstrous mask? We begin in London's East End. The year is 1888. Life is hard for most in these seedy slums, and for women especially. Many, like Mary Kelly here, are forced into a life of prostitution. Police try to maintain order. Men like Sergeant Harry Garrett spend a good part of their patrol moving prostitutes off the street. On your way. Now, he doesn't know it, but Sergeant Garrett might have just saved Mary Kelly's life. That's because tonight, her profession is not only the world's oldest, but also the most dangerous. Lurking in the shadows is a customer of a different kind, one who takes payment in blood. Although Mary is safe for now, sadly, another lady of the night will not be so lucky. Polly Nichols is, in this moment, making the acquaintance of a madman. For 150 years, his horrifying legacy has only grown because the killer was never caught. But thanks to a surprising intervention from across generations, we may now, at last, be able to put a face to the elusive Jack the Ripper. Nichols is a 43-year-old mother of 5 who, like many women in Whitechapel, relies on her body and her wits to make ends meet. But no amount of street smarts can help Polly, because tonight, on August 31st, 1888, she becomes Jack the Ripper's very first victim. That morning that Polly's knife-slashed corpse is discovered by a cart driver. The news quickly makes the morning papers, and police attribute the murder to a peculiarly revolting and barbarous character. 8 days later, on September 8th, 47-year-old Annie Chapman is seen spending her hard-earned street-walking money at an East End pub. Witnesses last see her leaving at 5:30 in the morning. Only a half hour later, Annie is found dead. Her injuries are ghastly, as several internal organs have been removed. This leads the coroner to state that these crimes are being committed by someone with knife skills of a surgical nature. Is this a mad doctor on the loose, a surgeon, or a butcher? Rumors swirl that London has a psychotic murderer on its hands. And it's confirmed on September 27th when the slasher sends a letter to the Central News Agency. The killer